Welcome to Get to Know with me, Morgan Williams. I've been in the creative industry for over a decade and meet people in different roles every day. But here's my secret. I don't always know what it is they actually do. So here I am getting to know. Each week, I sit down with industry insiders, learning what it is they actually do all day long. Whether you're trying to break into the industry, feeling a little bit lost, or just plain curious, Get to Know is here to dish out creative career insights and advice. So let's dive right into this episode. This week, I get to know Emily Morris, who is Sainsbury's studio manager and also my ex-boss. It was so interesting to dive into Emily's past experience, from studying styling in Milan to assisting on shoots for Grazia and with celebs like Rihanna, and then finding her feet in a leadership role with some of the biggest brands in fashion, Boohoo and ASOS to name a few. Emily has lots of amazing insights into the inner workings of photography studios and also dishes out some great advice for first-time managers. We also discuss her passion project, the Ecomm Studio Training Academy, to educate the next generation on this business. If you're looking to build a career in e-commerce, studio and management, this is the episode for you. So, hey Emily, thanks for joining me today. So you're the studio manager at Sainsbury's and you're also the founder of the Ecomm Studio Training Academy, or ESTA for short, which I'd love to come on to those a little bit later. But to start things off, can we take it all the way back? I want to know, did you always kind of see yourself working in fashion and styling and photography? Was that always your goal?
Yes, I always knew I wanted to work with clothes in somewhat. Even when as a child, I would have definitely a personal style. And what I love about clothes is that different personalities can express themselves in different ways. So clothes is definitely a direction I wanted to go in. After doing media at college, I realised I definitely also loved that side of things as well, but I didn't realise there was a combination of both. So yeah, realised very quickly I actually tried to do a fashion design course at college and realised I can't draw and I can't sew. So that aspect wasn't going to happen anytime soon. I then got introduced to styling, and I actually studied fashion styling in Milan Fashion Campus for a few months, and that's when I knew that is what the role I wanted to do. And in that course they taught me, everything about the history and how the styles have evolved over the years, but not necessarily what jobs were out there for stylists. So when I came back to London, I definitely just started assisting stylists, assisting art directors. It was mainly for magazines such as Grazia Italy. I was with them for quite a long time, worked with celebrities and TV, but that's how I sort of came into the industry. But yeah, definitely always had an interest in fashion.
That's really cool. Your time in Milan, so was that like a degree that you did there?
It wasn't a degree, it was a short course, so it was a certification.
Right.
I think it was
Okay,
called,
cool.
yes.
So how long were you over there for, and like how did you even find that course?
It was about 3-4 months I was over there, and I found it online. So when I started Googling different avenues for fashion other than design, it came up. And to be fair, I actually, when I was 18, I went traveling to Thailand, and when I came back I was like, I don't want to study in the UK. So I wanted to study abroad still. I definitely had the travel bug. So yeah, I essentially found it on Google, and yeah, realised that was definitely an out of see if I thought that industry would be interesting. So I definitely wanted to explore it a bit.
Yeah, amazing place to go for that as well, in Milan. I bet there was like inspiration everywhere.
It was so good, like honestly, because it was Fashion Week at the time as well, and I made friends with the
Amazing.
bouncers, and they actually snuck me into the D&G fashion show. So my
Oh,
first
wow.
ever fashion show was Dolce Gabbana in Milan.
Yeah, an amazing one.
One of the best life at 18, but that's just because I made friends with the bouncers, and they were such lovely guys. I also got to meet David Gandy, and it was great. It was so good. Yeah, really
That's
good.
amazing. And then you came back to the UK because you're not from London originally, are you?
No, I'm not. I'm from Milton Keynes.
So did you move back to Milton Keynes and then just like commute into London for your internships, or did you kind of move straight to London?
We moved straight into London. I definitely knew that's where all the internships were. So I got an internship, I think it was with Company magazine to start off with, and that was literally only for a couple of months, and then it just evolved into freelancing, assisting on absolutely everything. So I do that during the day because obviously, let's be honest, back then the internships didn't pay anything. You would work for free. You would work stupidly long hours. So in the evening, I actually also waitressed at a bar in Mayfair as well. So I had 2 jobs when I could actually, had the
Very
stamina.
busy.
It was.
Yeah.
It was. It was good. It was really fun times. But yeah, I'd
And was
literally finish
that?
the job at like 2 in the morning and then go to a shoot at 7 o'clock the
Oh
next
my
day.
gosh, crazy. Was that all styling internships and freelancing then?
Yes, literally all just styling related. So
Yeah.
like I said, a lot of it was for Grazia Italy. And then I also did Sky Living for a little bit. There was about 4 months of a TV show that I worked on, and also got to work with quite A-list celebrities as well. So that was quite fun. Really long hours, really long hours, and just
What kind of
absolutely.
things did they get you doing?
You know what? I literally did everything from sorting out the samples. So I'd have to go to all of the different PR showrooms around London and collecting all the samples and supporting with the rack up, making sure all the doc lists were there and everything was checked off. And then on the actual shoot, and I remember being absolutely petrified. I had to steam Rihanna's personal clothes, and I just literally remember shaking. I was so scared. Literally, and it was just be stuff like that, really, like just making sure all the samples were there, and yeah, it was mainly just sample related, I would say.
Yeah.
A lot of logistics as well and planning.
What was it like? Like, what was the atmosphere like on set for such big like celebs like Rihanna? I guess I've worked with celebs in like my career, but not Rihanna. You know what I mean? So like, how was it being on a set with that kind of,
You know
you
what?
know,
It was
caliber?
you know what? It was inspiring, I think, because it was just like, she was just so cool just to
Okay.
watch. So
Yeah.
I'd literally be sitting behind the camera just watching her on set, just being completely mesmerized.
Oh
But then there
wow.
was also elements where it was like we were at the hotel where she was getting ready at, and I had to bring out all of these like the bags of clothes. And yeah, as I was walking out, like all the paparazzi were like taking pictures of the clothes that I was carrying, and I was like, what? Out of my way, I'm trying to get to the car. So there was times where it was a bit like stressful, but yeah. And also because it was her, everyone just chucked clothes at her, in the sense of all the PR showrooms were just giving me stuff that we didn't even ask for. So that was hard to manage in that sense as well. But yeah, it was fun. It was fun. The atmosphere was really good. But like I said, very long hours. So we would just be sitting there waiting for quite a long time. But it was good. It was an experience.
So after that, then, what was the first full-time position that you went into? Was that TK Maxx?
Yeah, that was the first full-time one. I did a little bit of Ecomm styling when I was freelancing, and that's how I sort of first found out about Ecomm Studios. And then my first full-time position was TK Maxx. Started off as a stylist there, and as I joined, they were literally just in housing from being Packshot, I believe, and that was up in Birmingham. And we were just organising to move the studios from Birmingham to Rugby as well. So very exciting time to join. There was a lot of growth. Met some incredible people, and I was there for about 4.5 years. But yeah, it was absolutely loved TK Maxx.
And was that all as a stylist?
No. So I started as a stylist, and about 6 months into role, a styling lead position came up. And so I went for that, and luckily I got that. And I also had a counterpart as well, which was absolutely great. So the team itself was pretty big, because how TK Maxx worked when it came to peaks, operated in shifts that actually mimicked the warehouse. So at one point we actually had a team of stylists doing a 6-2, a 2-10 and a 10-6. So the team itself was quite big
Wow.
to manage. So for a first leadership position, learned an awful lot. Got such great support at that company. Like Matt was absolutely fantastic. Taught me everything I need to know about leadership. put me on some great courses about leadership and different personalities. And they also put me on a course called Lean Six Sigma Global Continuous Improvement. And at the time, I was a creative stylist. I was like, well, what is this? It was very like in focus, and I was like, oh, this is going to be horrendous. But I literally came out of it buzzing. Like, I absolutely loved it. I didn't actually realize how much my creative brain would love a process. And that introduced me to all things process, all things production. And that's definitely where I fell in love with leadership and where I fell in love with production. I knew that I loved fashion, and I definitely have a creative brain, but I definitely wanted to lean into the new passions that I found there as well. So after TK, I actually got headhunted for a role at Boohoo as styling manager there. And TK Maxx, they didn't do model, and I really missed model. And I was obviously at TK for 4.5 years, so I thought it was time. Don't get me wrong, the commute was to Manchester for Milton Keynes. It was a good 2.5 hours.
Oh my gosh, you commuted all the way there.
Yeah, I literally did. And it was pre-COVID. There was no working from home. But I was committed. I was like, you know what? Like, it was definitely a shift that I wanted to do. And I'm really glad I did. Boohoo were absolutely great. It's such a talented team over there. So they know how to do creative so well. The operation was polar opposite to TK Maxx, but that's what I loved about it, in the sense of I just completely learned different worlds of how Ecomm studios can operate on such a spectrum. So TK were definitely operational focused, and I felt like Boohoo were really creative focused, and you could see that in the content. And then after Boohoo, I then found the studio manager role at ASOS, where I met you.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess, what made you change? Because you said that you were like really into the creative side of it. What made you go into the leadership role at the beginning?
I suppose I've always been like a people person, but I suppose I was intrigued. I did like training, and I think that when new starters were coming in, I really enjoyed training them. So I felt that was the only sort of snippet I had of what leadership could feel like, and I definitely really enjoyed that. So when that role came up and I looked at it, I was like, I could definitely do this aspect. And then when I actually started doing the leadership role, I'll be honest, it's probably, out of all of the creative and operations, leadership for me is definitely my favorite, because I don't know what it is, but I just really find it beneficial, sort of mentoring and coaching, and I just really enjoyed that side of the role. So I just lent into that further and further.
Yeah, and I mean, you've gone on now. So that was your first one in TK Maxx. You went to Boohoo, then you went on to ASOS. You did like 2 different roles at ASOS as well, wasn't it? It was the styling manager, then the studio manager, and now you've gone into Sainsbury's, which again, 2 different roles there. So you've had quite a lot of leadership experience now, really. Have each of the studio manager roles been different, or is it generally the same thing that you do across each company?
It's actually strange, like, but I think completely different but the same. So let me try and explain that. But I think it's like the business priorities make the role different, but the duties are essentially the same, if that makes sense. So like I mentioned, TK Maxx was so operational focused. So when it came to, you know, tracking KPIs, making sure that the team were motivated, all of them things, that applied into each of the studios I've worked in. But then there was just other elements that, sort of, for example, at ASOS, where it was getting the balance of both and not compromising the creative was absolutely key. So it was, I don't know. I think that the roles definitely varied, but on paper, you know, the duties did stay the same. It was just the processes, and I suppose the objectives changed a little.
Yeah. Okay. Can you talk me through what it is you actually do day to day as a studio manager? Let's talk about Sainsbury's, because that's where you're at right now.
Okay. Yeah, that would help. Okay, so actually, to be fair, one of the reasons why I love my role is because every day is completely different. So I can't even say this is what I do at 9, this is what I do at 10. It's completely different every day. Some days I will be creating a pack and a deck for our visual strategy and our content strategy of how we want our Ecomm images to look and how we want our copy to be represented. Then putting time in with the stakeholders, getting their input into things, seeing if it clashes with any of their business priorities or how we could support theirs further. So visual strategy, things like that. And then somewhere else in the week, it will be definitely one-to-ones with my team and team meetings. We make sure we have an anchor day every week. So that means everybody's in, we get some snacks in, we have a team meeting, and we do that
Face to
weekly.
face as well.
Yeah. So we have our anchor day, we have one-to-ones, and then on the flip side of that, might also be doing a work stream about how to get products online as quick as possible, be doing budgeting, operational and production stuff, as well as lots and lots of interviews at the moment. So yeah, I suppose every day is different. I think there's definitely elements of that creative side and, you know, how we want our top line strategy to look. But also definitely from an operation production side, making sure we're tracking the KPIs and reporting back on them. So completely varied, to be honest.
Yeah. And what roles within your team do you manage? Is it a group of photographers and stylists? Are there more that you manage as well?
Yeah, so my current team, I look after a production team. So I have a shoot coordinator and a sample coordinator. We also have a photography team, a styling team, a retouch team, and a copy team. And obviously on top of that, we also have freelancers, so hair and makeup freelancers and freelancers for each of the disciplines for when we come into peaks. However, I'm actually moving into the GM and food studio role. And in that role, that team's a lot wider. So I won't only be looking after production coordinators. There'll also be SPEs, schedulers, shoot producers, set build teams, and then the photographers, stylists, and so on. So yeah, quite varied disciplines of roles that I look after at the moment.
And I guess you're coming from a styling background, because I think what probably holds a lot of people back from putting themselves out there for these types of roles is they don't have experience across all of those different areas. So they kind of feel like, how can I lead that team? What's your advice for that? Did you ever feel a bit put off to go for these leadership roles because of those reasons? Or what kind of motivated you to go into such a wide team to look after that maybe you've only got actual on-set experience for such a small part?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And to be fair, I've actually worked with studio managers that have no on-set experience. So their background is none of them disciplines, but they're bloody really good leaders and they know process and they know creative. So I think what motivated me to stretch out further was, I suppose, a bit of a passion for like learning new things. I think just by shadowing that retoucher for the day, that can, you know, really upskill your styling and upskill your brain of processes. And I just think that, yeah, definitely that passion for learning. So even though I don't necessarily have experience looking after a set build team, I want to know what the set build team do. They look bloody incredible and the stuff that they build. So even just stuff like that, I just think it's definitely a passion for learning, not to like pushing myself. So I think that constantly learning is a key thing for me to keep motivated, to be fair.
Yeah. And what are the main things that you love about being in a leadership role?
The main things I love about being in a leadership role is definitely seeing the progression in a team or progression in people. I think I just find it so satisfying and it makes all the job worthwhile when you literally have watched a junior, I literally had it at ASOS where you literally watch a senior assistant go in to be like a absolutely incredible senior stylist just in a matter of years, and watching them on that path and knowing that you supported elements that opened up paths for them, supported with, you know, them conversations and coaching conversations. I think it's really satisfying in that sense. So I think that's definitely what I'd definitely enjoy, is seeing the team's progression in their own personal careers.
And what's the hardest bit you would say about being a studio manager?
Fair. Hardest bit about being a studio manager, you know what? I'm quite heavily dyslexic. And I suppose that is definitely a strength though of mine. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because it's definitely a strength of mine on how I look at situations and problem solve. So it's definitely a supportive strength. But on the flip side of that, there is a lot of Excel sheets when it comes to studio management. There is elements of Excel and a lot of budgeting and numbers, which it's fine if you've got the support there as well. I think it's absolutely fine. But I think there's times I think that can be quite hard knowing, I don't know, all the Excel formulas. And then if you take a formula out, it can destroy the whole sheet and just that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. So I would probably say that part, the admin-y side of it can be quite admin heavy sometimes. But yeah, I'd probably say that.
Okay. Yeah. I think as well, one of my things that's probably been quite hard is sort of handling team members that aren't performing. And like sometimes you've got to make that decision to let someone go, which is an awful experience, which I know both of us have been through a really awful experience together on that one. But how do you handle those instances? So maybe not someone that you're actually going to let go, but someone's underperforming. How do you handle that, and how do you get them performing again?
So yeah, I think when somebody's underperforming, I always try and assess if they can't do it because they don't have the skill set, or they won't do it and it's a behavior thing. So I try to make sure that when I'm looking at a situation, you know, say for example, they're not following the style guide, it's a photographer and they're not following the style guide for whatever reason. Is it a case that they haven't had the appropriate training and they don't know the style guide yet and they just need a bit more information? Or is it because they want to do their own thing and they don't give a shit, they don't give a crap about the style guide? So I think assessing the can't and the won't is probably the key thing for me to know. If it's a behavioural thing, which don't get me wrong, sometimes it is, that is when you have to, in my view, give that honest feedback and have them really clear lists of expectations. So a list of competencies for the role and really saying like, how do you think you perform against each one, and have that conversation together. And when it comes to, you know, I don't know, say for example, on a photographer's competency, it says adhere to all the style guides, push the creative XYZ. When you come onto that section, then you can have that discussion to say, how do you feel that you're doing it right now? And most of the time you will, in my view, you will get like some raw, honest feedback about how they're not enjoying their role, or it might be X, Y, and Z. And I think that trying to just make sure that that's how I try to pull out honest feedback, is really being really clear on the expectations in black and white, asking them how they think they're doing on it. And then that conversation essentially evolves. But if it is a case of a behaviour, they don't want to be there anymore, then that is obviously a conversation that you just need to continue to pursue for essentially a bit of an exit plan. But
yeah. I think that's good though. It needs to you need to have that kind of human element to it, just like a conversation. In a leadership role, yeah, you are someone's boss, but you're not there to boss them around, are you? It's to collaborate as a team and come together to make something like a bigger picture work, isn't it? So I think you need to have instances like that. Kind of, you need to just have the honest conversations, get it out, and then agree on something. So no, I think that's really good.
At home, and like you don't know until you start probing, like, and really like asking that, how do you feel about that? How are you feeling at the moment? Because, to be honest, a lot of the time when people have been underperforming that have previously performed, so it's definitely a behaviour thing and not a can't. That for me has definitely been outside of work influences impacting them, or it could even be something in work that's really annoying them that they haven't been able to voice. So I think always checking in on them is first instance. It helps guide next steps.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess the other difficult thing that you talked about is like the admin heavy side. What have you done to kind of upskill yourself in that area? What tips have you got for other people who are maybe first time in a leadership role that struggle with that as well?
I was going to say delegate. But no, not delegate. I think from an upskilling point of view, I feel like definitely like Excel courses have been really, really helpful. So at Sainsbury's, we've got a lot of great online learning courses and modules that we can do. So definitely immersing myself in that training element. And when I joined, like literally my time with finance, it was just a case of like just asking the honest questions, like what do I do? And just if I can't do something, I will say. And I think just as long as I'm not sort of pretending to know what it all is all the time, and if I feel like I can't do something, I will flag it. But from an upskill point of view, I definitely look at if something is new and I don't know how to do it, I will try and get the training, whether that is by a report and that can do all the Excel sheets and sitting next to them and watching what they do, and then trying to do it myself. Yeah, essentially it's a mix. I think training is probably a key one when I
Yeah.
realise I can't do it. I'll hold my hands up if I can't do something though.
Yeah.
Most of the
I think
time I
that's
will.
important though. A lot of people do try and just get on with it and figure it out and then mess it up. But I think it's always good to ask for help, isn't it? Like, if you don't know how to do it, just ask. Let's talk about visual strategy for a minute. I feel like that's probably one of the exciting parts of the role, is evolving, or, setting from scratch, but evolving a visual strategy. How do you go about doing that? I know recently in Sainsbury's you've had a bit of a impact in kind of rehauling what they're doing. So maybe you could talk us through what you've done there.
So to start with, I think one of the first things that I did was really look at the studio's priorities. So identifying if this studio wants to be creative excellence, or does it want to be operational excellence? Does it want the balance of both? Because through my times at ASOS, Boohoo and TK Maxx, I definitely learned not everyone wanted that time to site as quick as possible. Not everyone wanted draw-dropping content. So I really had to sort of take a minute and step back. And then on top of that, I also really had to, the way I got that priorities was essentially really talking to the stakeholders and understanding what their expectation from the studio was, against what the studio thought it was. So don't get me wrong, it was a lot of observation when I first went in. And I think when it comes to, I suppose, the visual strategy, I think we're based in marketing over at the Two Studio. So we've got a lot of different feeds of information, whether that's coming from the marketing team directly, whether that's coming from trading, buying, design.
Mm-hmm.
If you drew a spider diagram, we'd be in the middle and we're getting streams of information and different expectations of things. So
Yeah.
what we have essentially done is every single month we do a content review, and this is where we empower the teams to really look at our content and challenge it and say, is it showing up how we want to show up? This is where we'll do our competitor analysis, bring in what everyone else is doing, how can we be better, how do we benchmark, and then taking snippets of that away, updating the shoot guide, and then essentially we'd be also sharing that and signing it off with the stakeholders. But yeah, it's a bit of a, I suppose it's an exciting one, because don't get me wrong, it's like, when it comes to the creative, the teams can really like push it and test, and it's really great sort of empowering them to go away and have a think about things that can make it better in that sense. But yeah, I would definitely say observation was definitely a top one, really understanding what was expected of the studio, and then refining the output. So with all these feeds of information coming in, what are we doing with that information? So obviously when we have a review each month, we've got the information from buying and design, and we've got all these different information, so we collate it and then make a next step. So yeah, that's essentially how we've tackled it. But yeah, I think it's been quite successful, and I feel like it's really empowered the team to push things forward as well.
Yeah, it looks amazing now. I think it's looking really good. How do you get the team involved with that? Do you then take all that information back and kind of give them like a bit of a direction what you want to do with that, and then kind of leave it up to them? Or are you really involved with all the test shoots and everything that goes on after
So
that first step?
it's a bit of a mixture, but we've got a styling manager and a photography manager and a copy lead, so I let them lead their areas.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it comes to testing, for example, like we tested something recently, and they'd bring it back and just sort of pass it over before it went to the stakeholders. And my challenge was, that looks really nice. How are you going to do it at scale? Can we make sure that we don't put one product through two different sets? Sort of not like, I suppose, so I just make them see other elements that they might
Yeah.
not see and support them with the implementation of it. And also, if the aesthetic that we don't think is aligning with everything else, obviously I would say, but most of the time I let the managers lead their own areas, and then just support from an implementation perspective.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. And I saw recently, so you've done some tests for socials as well. What's your opinion on using Ecomm on socials? Because I feel like this is a big talking point at the moment.
Yeah, you know what? I think the team have a really good relationship with our social team. Like I said, we're in marketing, and we just had a studio refurb, and we actually had this. It's really cool. It says what to wear on top of our grid racking, where the stylists rack up, and they actually did a bit of a GIF, and it's on our social at the moment. And they were just testing different things because we had a bit of downtime, and yeah, I think I'm a bit mixed on it. I think it's good. I really love an alignment of a customer journey, and I think that there's elements of how Ecomm is looking at the moment. It's more aspirational as opposed to just information led.
Yeah.
So you think with the elements of the aspirational imagery coming in, I think it actually could look really nice and tie in quite nicely with that customer journey element. I think it's a tricky one though, because I do think that actually does white background world on a grid, right? I don't know. But I do think there's definitely elements where it can work. But maybe not so much on the grid. I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things that we need to test a little bit more of. I think some companies do it amazing, like Essence, their alignment across socials and Ecomm is just amazing. And like you just know that it's them. But then I think some brands it's not going to work with. So you need to kind of test it and figure it out, see what that is like, definitely.
Yeah.
You've been involved as well in a lot of studio setups.
Yeah.
So I'd love to chat about that. Was the first one ASOS that you were involved with?
You know what? Thinking about it, no, probably not, because when I was at TK, we moved from Birmingham to a new space in Rugby.
Yeah.
So we supported setting that up. And then when I was at Boohoo, we actually set up Miss Pap in the basement whilst I was there as well. So I
Okay.
think every
You've
studio,
basically been everywhere.
literally every single place I've worked with, there's been some element of new production going somewhere. So yeah, I think this one's was definitely ASOS though. I think obviously making a second studio in a different location, that was probably the biggest involvement one. And then also my most recent one is refurbing current space to make more photo studio sets.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's definitely been interesting. I think one of the main things that I think I've learned when it comes to refurbing a studio or moving a studio operation, again, is definitely understanding the priorities and also making sure you've got a really solid contingency plan.
Yeah.
I think them two things there. And just managing the expectations of the team, making sure they're updated on absolutely everything that's happening, making them feel involved in that sense, because if you're having to move them or they're having to like temporary shoot somewhere, they're going to want to know what's happening because that disrupts their routine. So I think
Yeah.
understand, like, having that communication, but also to the stakeholders as well, and timelines and things like that. I think expectation managing and then contingency plan, definitely my top things moving forward.
Have you ever had to use a contingency plan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most recent one, I think we the build went over slightly, so we did build over Christmas, so factored that in. And we were lucky enough to have our sister studio over at Bradwell put us up for in the months that we were getting the refurb, so it was only about 20 minutes away. But yeah, it went on a little bit longer, so I had to work with the production team over at Bradwell and make sure that we've got enough shooting that we could still have that space for a little bit longer, because Bradwell gets booked up in that sense. So yeah, we
Fair.
extend our stay a little
Have
bit.
you had many teams push back on not wanting to move to the new studio or not
Yeah.
wanting to do something in the new studio?
Yeah, I can. No, there's definitely been I wouldn't call it pushback. I think there was concerns because like I said, people, when it comes to change, like, everyone reacts to change different ways, and there's also a lot of other factors to take in. So if somebody lives really close to that studio, and then you've got to you now commute like in 40 minutes the other way. All of them elements have to be considered. But no, we definitely have had, like, there was definitely been, like, even previously when we were at ASOS or even other roles, there's definitely been elements of resistance to change.
Yeah. I think it is a tricky one, especially if you're opening up a new location and everyone was all very happy with what was happening in their job, and now they've got to commute somewhere else. They've got to figure out a new route and kind of get out of that routine a little bit. But I think it's about presenting why the change is like key and what the good things are gonna be that come out of this. And yeah, you've got to take people on that journey and get them involved a little bit, don't you?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
All right, so let's talk about ESTA a little bit more.
Yeah.
Can you
Sounds
tell me, what is it exactly?
So ESTA is Ecomm Studio Training Academy, and it is essentially a business where I'm looking to educate and train the next generation or a bit more about our industry. So the reason why it all started was I did notice that in the media and fashion industries, I felt like the next generation had a bit of a lack of awareness of the industry and how quickly it was actually evolving. It's definitely got better over the last few years, don't get me wrong, it's definitely improving. But our industry evolves so quickly, and I just feel like that the most up-to-date information about our industry is not getting to the educational institutes quick enough. So I noticed it through my own experience. So I didn't have a clue when I came into the industry that Ecomm Studios existed, that balance of media and fashion that I really wanted. I didn't know was out there.
Yeah.
So that was from my own experience. But then even over a decade later, I was still noticing when I'm interviewing candidates for a role, but any different roles in studios, again, I just felt there was a really clear gap of information about our industry and it wasn't being touched on. So what ESTA essentially wants to do, what the plan is to provide educational institutes and businesses with the most up-to-date information, and to do this through workshops, lectures, or online courses. And this content would be configurable to either the institute or the business. So whether that's sort of an update on what currently they're teaching at the moment, or if it is literally a case of starting from scratch, complete basics of what Studio Ops is. But yeah, in a nutshell, that's what it is. I think this is definitely a completely passion project. Because like we touched on, absolutely love sharing information and mentoring and coaching evolving creative. So definitely a passion project. And where it's currently at right now is at the moment I'm looking for partners in this space to support us getting us off the ground a bit more, because this first year I've definitely really focused on the research and development stages, but now definitely ready to sort of start getting things rolling this summer. So yeah, that's essentially what it is in a nutshell, and a bit more about, I suppose, where I am right now.
No, it's super exciting. I think the workshops and courses sound like they're such a good idea and definitely needed, because I totally agree. Like, people just don't really know what kind of goes on. Part of the reason I've started the podcast as well, like, just
Yeah.
to share that knowledge with everyone. Just from my personal experience, I didn't really know all of the different roles that went into just putting images on a website. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. And also I feel like it's just one of them where it's like, I think our industry is not actually well known, but actually
Yeah.
our industry is rapidly growing. Like, things are still going to go online. Like, it's only going to grow. And it just blows my mind, like, the lack of awareness about our industry. So I think it's a bit of like raising awareness as
Yeah,
well.
definitely. I think
But
that'll be really good. I like the workshops, especially for me, sound super exciting. I think they would be amazing. And you've done a couple of like talks. You went into what was it, Fashion Retail Academy, wasn't it? And spoke to the students there. Have you got any more of those sort of lined up, or are you planning to do more of those this year?
yeah, I'm definitely planning to do some more this year. I'm currently in talks with a couple of universities at the moment, and a business as well. Looking again to sort of build on the knowledge as opposed to starting from scratch. So looking at the current curriculum in that sense and seeing how we can make it more up to date. and the evolutions in the industry at the moment. So yeah, I had a couple of them lined up, but nothing solid just yet, but definitely looking to push it more over the summer. Like I said, I think the research and development phase is now done. So now it's just definitely looking to, get out there and actually start doing it a bit more.
No, so exciting. I think it's going to be amazing. Where can people find ESTA?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. It's called Ecomm Studio Training Academy.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we wrap up, I'd love to know your top 3 tips for someone trying to break into the industry.
Top 3 tips.
Yeah.
My first tip would be to not put yourself in a box when you go into a photo studio role. So say if you join as a production coordinator, that does not mean that you have to stay in production for the rest of your time in that studio. I think cross training is so valuable, and where you can talk to your manager about cross training. Just from an upskill perspective, I just feel like nobody can ever have enough skills in their skill bank. I think that's really valuable. So go in with a broad mindset, going into a studio, because I do think there's a lot of opportunities. Like I said, when I started at TK, I didn't know I had a passion for leadership and production until I was encouraged and looked elsewhere. So I think that, you can also find different passions, is what I'm
Yeah, I
getting at.
definitely agree with that. Like for
Yeah.
me, I started off as a photographer, but then I went into production a little bit, and then I switched into hair and makeup, and then I went into leadership. I've kind of dotted all over the place. So I totally agree with you. Like, you don't put yourself in a box because you never know where it's going to take you.
Yeah, literally. And then, so that's definitely my top 1. 2 and 3, I think number 2, I think relationships is absolutely key. I think relationship building and networking, but not in like, handing out business cards way, like getting to know your team members, because I think the industry is really small, but also really big. But I think it's just so nice that actually when you move into a different role, you'll get a freelancer reach out and be like, oh, we're looking for stylists at the moment, and a previous stylist that you worked with 2 studios ago is reaching out to you. I just don't think you can ever underestimate how important the network is. I know I got a lot of support from the network when I was in between roles, and I just find it really valuable. So I think
Definitely.
keeping yourself open to relationships in the industry, I think, is also key.
Yeah.
And number 3, I would say keeping yourself up to date in the industry. So like I mentioned, I think there's a lot of evolutions constantly happening, a lot of trends. It moves like the wind. And I just think that keeping yourselves informed and up to date on these evolutions is really key, and it can really be valuable for the role that you're in your studio as well. And I think that again, it kind of ties back to the first point about keeping your skills bank and things like that. But I think keeping yourself with the most up to date knowledge about the industry, but also about your roles and how that might be evolving in the industry is, again, just really valuable. So I'd probably say them 3.
Yeah, amazing. And you did a course which kind of kick-started your career. Would you really recommend that people do some sort of course, not necessarily a degree, but to get that knowledge in the first place?
Yeah, I think short courses are so valuable. Because that's the thing, I was so in between when I went to Milan. Like I only found what styling was on Google. I had no idea what it was. There was really lack of
Oh,
information.
wow.
Like I had no idea. Like all I thought was fashion was, like I said, the design course. And when I realised I couldn't
Yeah.
draw or sew, I was like, oh. But when I Googled it, there was other jobs. But I didn't know about them enough that I would plant myself into it to be 4 years. And also when it came to styling, I didn't personally feel at the time that I needed to do 4 years worth of knowledge, because I think I had quite a lot of the passion and skills, but I definitely needed just a short course, like this is it, this is what it does, this is the history on it. I think different brains work differently, but yeah, I definitely advise short courses, especially if you're not sure. I think that can really help you getting to know if that's your career or something else.
Awesome. And where can people follow you if they want to hear from you directly?
Again, I would say LinkedIn. So Emily Morris on LinkedIn. I don't have any Instagram or anything like that really for work. So yeah, on LinkedIn.
Amazing. Cool. So thanks so much for today. It's been, do you know what, really interesting. And I feel like you've given me some tips as well for my studio manager role. So no, definitely been helpful for anyone in the industry or, you know, trying to figure out their next move or breaking into the industry as well. So thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, Morgan. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Get to Know. That one was jam-packed with information from identifying priorities, handling underperforming employees, managing a team you have no direct experience in, and evolving a visual strategy. Emily shared so much knowledge with us in such a short amount of time. I'm also very excited to see ESTA evolving, and it sounds like such an amazing opportunity for newbies to learn the inner workings of a studio. I'd love to know your key takeaways, so please leave a review, and if you really like this one, please rate and subscribe for more episodes like it. If you want to learn more, follow us on TikTok and Instagram at the Get to Know Podcast, and I'll catch you the same time next week where I'm going to get to know Theo McDermott, the Model Club's head booker, who dishes the details on scouting, casting, and setting up an agency from scratch. If you want to know the ins and outs of agency life, you won't want to miss it.